One of the more difficult areas to deal with on the other side of the car was this little return flange that creates the pocket for the window, that so that the wind is not confined behind the sheet metal, that you can actually take the window back out at some future point if you needed to. The main thing is you've got a lot of different surfaces going in a lot of different directions here. And if you want to just project something that's going to run exactly 3/8 of an inch off of the glass here, it's kind of difficult. I struggled with some spacers and, back and forth, and taking the panel on and off and on and off and making adjustments and so forth. And I wasn't 100% satisfied with what I ended up with over there. So I tried to do it a little differently this time. I've left a whole lot more material than I did last time, so that I'm not really fighting with just a thin edge when I go to weld this inner panel on. But then the idea of how do I keep it consistently spaced off the glass, 3/8 of an inch. The glass curves away from us, as you can see this way here. So, just put in a flat piece of 3/8 material under there, that's not going to work. So I cut a bunch of strips of just some 3/8 inch plywood. And then I slowly but surely cut the strips to the right shape so that this now is flexible enough to lay over top of the glass. Now I'll tape that in there, and when I go to put my sheet metal on, of course this is not the kind of sheet metal I'll be using, but anyway, I'll be able to lay it right onto this piece, and then it'll play out exactly where it needs to play out down here and across these compound areas here, so I'll get the exact profile, so everything will be consistent with the curve of the glass as I weld that piece in. But yeah, it's a little bit different than I did on the other side. I'm trying to get a little bit better technique. But anyway, that's what I did here. I thought that might be interesting to somebody. I got the quarter panel off the car right now, and so I'm on the inside of the panel. I'm doing a number of things. I'm trying to address any irregularities in the panel, doing a little hammer and dolly work. Also, what I'm doing is, because of the method that I use, which is to just tack weld. I don't have a TIG welder, and I'm not basically trained as a TIG welder, so I'm stuck with this method, which is a little bit inferior to TIG welding, where you can get pretty much go have a nice run and get the panel nice and closed up. This is a little more time consuming and it's a little rougher. But anyway, what I'm doing right now is taking this LED light here, and I'm running it underneath the panel, and I'm trying to find any pinholes that I might have left on the panel from the front weld, and I'm addressing those pinholes and tacking up any areas in the seams that might look like they didn't get a good enough penetration, where I can still see the sheet metal edge pretty significantly. And also some areas, there's an area here that I really didn't get a lot of good penetration across that seam. And I want to make sure it's welded up good, so I'm just welding it up on the backside also. But for the most part, a lot of these are closed up really well. There's a lot of areas around this gas hole that were not really perfect. There's a lot of stuff going on here, so a lot of rewelding, a lot of beating it out, trying to average it out a little bit better. I'll be turning the panel. I've done a little, you can see I've done a little hammering here. When I'm done with all this, I'll turn the panel over, and then I'll use my hand English wheel to try and smooth out some of that stuff and get ready to go back on the car. But more tedious stuff, but it's definitely going a lot quicker than the other side, because I know where I screwed up on the other side, so to speak, and hopefully I'll be making some fresh mistakes on this side. But anyway, that's it. So you see, I had to do quite a bit of beating and banging to get this thing averaged out, and so while it kind of looks a little worse than it actually is, it's in pretty good shape now. Pretty happy with all the highs and lows have been taken out. I still got to address this little bump over here. I'll probably have to cut this seam right over here and drop that back in and re-weld that. But we're getting close. We're closing in on this quarter panel. I've gone ahead and spent basically the last 2 days, doesn't look like 2 days worth of work, but doing the inner fender closure. This is from the wheel tub out to the quarter panel. This piece here had to be all shaped and has a flange on the top for this panel to push against, and so it was a lot of back and forth forming this panel to fit up inside here and flange over to the stock inner fender tub. I trimmed probably about 1.5 inches away from the profile of it, so it's up as high as I could get it before I made the transition to this piece here. Hopefully that'll help keep from having any issues with tire rubbings, so we'll see if that works out. But so it's kind of hard to see. See if we can spin around here and see some of the upper detail over here, how this all worked out. And this is the back panel, and then back over here you can see the trunk extension down here to the bottom of the quarter panel. This will eventually get spotted through here on the bottom side here when I install the quarter panel for the final time. So that's where I am right now. It's like I said, a repeat of the other side, and but it's going a little bit quicker because I had a lot of patterns from the other side to work with, which is always helpful. They weren't exactly alike. As I say, there's a difference in this side because this side has a big pocket for the gas fill tube right here, and the other side has it's flat across here, and there's a pocket, but it's shallower, and it's for the carbon charcoal filter, I should say, for fume recovery for the fuel system. And that's on the other side, and that mounts up inside the wheel tub. So that's where we're at now, and like I said, it's a long process, but we're getting there. Just thought I'd show you the inner fender well, the extension that I built up when I had the quarter panel on. And well, it seems like a simple piece, just as on the other side. Yeah, it actually had to be shaped, rounded over, and so there's quite a bit going on here. This flange had to be turned in, this flange had to be turned in, and as you turn those flanges in, naturally it changes the shape. So it was a lot of work getting up and down off the ground to get in and out, refit this thing, and then take it out, shrink it, stretch it, shape it, put it back in a little at a time. Also, the shape that it's attached to over here is very irregular. It has a lot of dips and depressions and so forth. So I had to keep getting back up and down to get all these fit up on the inside so that they had a tighter fit. So when I go to weld it, it'll all be closed up pretty good. But I thought I'd give you another look at, I know I've already showed you the other side, but there's a piece down here that still has to be made, and one at the very bottom, a small piece over here to complete the closure. And then I have to paint it before I put the quarter panel back on. I've got a lot of this area over here trimmed out, ready for the quarter panel to go back on. So those seams are cut already. I have to take this piece, cut this back free, paint the inside of the panel before I put it back in, reinstall it, and then I'll have to seal all of this around here so that if any water gets back into this cavity back here, it'll just roll forward and not down into the insides of the car. So a little bit more progress, and that's where this stands right now. Also, while I'm back here, an interesting note, I was watching another YouTuber who's putting together a wide body Dodge Magnum. He's putting together a Charger Magnum combination, grafting the back of the Magnum, the hatch and the roof onto a modern Charger, and then he's waiting right now for the parts for the quarter panels that are specific to the wide body, which is interesting. They're not available yet, but what those pieces do is they come back, the inner wheel tub comes back to here, this section here. This whole section is wider on the wide body Charger. So it's an interesting piece to know that that is available, because with a project like this in the future, I'll actually be able to get a stock Dodge piece. If you separate this one inner fender, it's actually the outer section of the inner wheel tub. You separate this section out, which is pretty extensive to do that, but you can take this entire piece off and replace it with a piece that's actually made wider to accommodate the wider tires on the stock wide body. I think it's a Hellcat Charger for 2020. So like I said, at this particular time, those pieces are not available to anybody, but as soon as Dodge makes them available to all auto body shops and repair dealers, they might become available to anybody, and it'll save me a lot of this malarkey, unless of course I end up doing something more custom on the outside again, in which case, no matter what it is, it'll have to have some sort of a transition made up. But it'll be nice to have some reassurance that there won't be any tire rubs, because it's been designed by the factory for wider tires. Interesting, but hopefully in the future those parts will be available. Well, I was all ready to declare victory and start putting this on permanently. I got it all set into place, and all of the inner fender tubs, clecoed on. And I decided to just finish welding it here till I was fresh. I finished this up at the end of the day last time I worked on it. And I said, you know what? I've got it tacked in up here already. I just got it all spaced out and lined up with this, corrected this gap here, and pretty happy with that. And I started following up with lining everything else up at the bottom and on the bottom on this side. And for some reason or other, I just went to the front of the car, and you probably can't see it with the camera here, but there's an aspect of this area right over here that bulges out at the very end of the window. You can see the quarter window right there. It's just it's a little bit of a prominence there where the quarter panel bows out. I tried flattening it as much as I could to get it closer to the rendering, but I couldn't get it quite as close as the drawing. So that's what I settled for, but I was pretty happy with it. It was flattish, if you will. And so I stood and I started looking from side to side. And again, you can't really see it from, now that I've got this template in place, it's a little obscured. But this was fatter. I could see it. And I got a little distraught, but because I had everything ready to go to final weld this quarter panel on. So here I am back working on it again. And so the first thing that I did was go to the other side and make another template that comes across this area to see, how much this was pushed out. But because it's not a complete template and doesn't go all the way to the bottom, it has a little bit of spring in it, and so you can see if I push on it a little bit, it'll go in and out. Anyway, so very difficult to determine just how far out this spot is supposed to be relative to the center line, and I'll show you how I'm going to have to go about it, because I thought that this would just be a simple matter of putting this template on, tacking it here, and tacking it beyond the point where I have the deviation, but there's still enough flexibility in it. There's about 1/4 of an inch of difference, as you can see by the movement of the metal up front here. So I'm over on this side of the car, put up my body stand, and came over and just picked a point on this prominence And I have a level line over here, so I know that I can match on the other side. This little tab on the door over here measures 4 3/8 up to my line. This line is level across. And then I took and I clamped a block to my body stand here and around a level over to here, so that then I could swing the level, set it on here, and swing it over and get a point over here, which is in a level plane with this. All of that is also relates to, I have a string plumb bob that's barely grazing the roll of the body here, and it comes up, and this is my reference line now. Now this is straight, just plumb, and so I can now measure from this string into this point, and I could take this whole rig, go around to the other side, establish all of these points on the other side, measure off my string. Right now this is to the glass itself, it's 8 3/4 in at that height. The difficulty is this is at a slope, of course, so you got to be very careful you stay dead level. Just a little bit up or down, and you could go in or out an 3/8 of an inch, depending on how high up you go on this relative to this plumb string. So I have to go to the other side, reestablish all of this stuff here, and then of course I've got a measurement over here which is 6 5/8 off this string. So when this is hopefully matched at 8 3/8, I will know that this needs to go into 6 5/8, and that's where it has to be held, and then this piece has to be put back in, which was all in, welded up, and the whole 9 yards. It was, like I said, it was ready to go. But you know, warts and all, this project, I wanted to show you that there's a lot of steps backwards, which you know, you don't always see to doing something like this. It's not just a straightforward act of oh yeah, bing bang boom, this is where it goes, and on excuse me, on you go. Sometimes you get a step back and you go, oh, what the heck was I thinking about that, and or how did I miss that? And it's all part of the process, though. So like I always say, you never want to celebrate too early with stuff like this, because it always comes back to bite you. So moving along. Well, that was no fun, but it's all welded back together. The unfortunate thing that I just realized, I popped the gas cap cover in, and I spent, as you can refer to one of my earlier videos, a little bit of time making sure that it didn't rotate the ring that this gas cap actually fits into. What I didn't anticipate was the body line on the quarter panel. It slopes back on the Challenger, and they oriented the gas cap to kind of flow downhill in a way. Well, that might have looked good with that quarter panel over there, but it makes the word fuel kind of look like it's going downhill on this quarter panel here, which doesn't look good to me. So I'm gonna have to get in there, and I'm gonna have to, there's some holes that this thing locks into, and I'm gonna have to relocate the holes after all that trouble of trying to get it the same orientation. So should I ever for some ungodly reason do one of these again, I have to keep that in mind, that whatever I'm putting on the car, put the quarter panel up and eyeball it the old good old-fashioned way. I was more concerned with not distorting the neck of the quarter panel, or excuse me, the quarter panel, the gas filling tube that's behind there, and creating all kinds of issues with that. But yeah, so a little bit more messing around with this. It's all welded in around the wheel hole here and along the bottom of the trunk extension, I've got a little tiny piece right in here I have to put in there. And then I have to seam seal the rest of the inner fender tub. And then hopefully I can move on to the next phase of this project, which will be repeating the door on the other side. So yeah, I had this thing already locked in down at the bottom here with some a bonding epoxy, because I told you the story about this all being filled with foam on this rocker, so I couldn't weld that on. So once I had that all bonded, that's when I discovered my issue with this area being too fat and relative to the other side. So I had to cut this off and rework it on the car, which is not ideal. The metal wants to shrink and stretch, and you've got no way to beat it back out. So I had to use the trusty old stud gun over there and pull out all the little dents and imperfections. Of course, it's not as good as being able to hammer and dolly it and get it nice and flat, but I guess that's why they invented Bondo. So, all right, that's it for now. So I went ahead and straightened out that gas door so that it's kind of right reading relative to this panel. Wasn't too bad of an adjustment. I'm going to have to figure a way to keep it from rotating, though. It's a little sloppy in the hole now. You can rotate it a little bit. The pins that, there were drill holes for the pins to fit in exactly, keep it located, but I'll get around to that. But then I went ahead and covered all the bare metal with zinc chromate metal etch primer. I really need to do that on the other side to keep some of the flash rust from forming on the surface. Just makes me feel better, because this is such a slow project, to protect it a little bit as I go. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in at the end.